How do you live in a world that is filled with images that you can't avoid? I would suggest to you it starts with the book of Job. What? There's nothing to learn in that Old Testament book. Job made a covenant with his eyes. What is a covenant? It is a till death do us part contractual agreement. And that's what this represents. That's why you said that at your wedding vows. You were cutting a covenant. When Job said, I've made a covenant with my eyes to not look upon a fair maiden, in other words, to not look and fantasize and lust, he was saying, I cut a deal before God that says, Lord, if I break this covenant, kill me. A covenant typically was cut literally with with an animal that was cut in two. And then the two participants typically would walk through it, signifying a walk of death, till death do us part, proclaiming, Lord, if I break this vow with this fellow, do to me what has been done to these animals. Job was cutting a covenant with his eyes, stating plainly, if I violate this agreement with this body part, Lord, kill me. He took it that seriously. He seemed to know what Jesus preached about in the Sermon on the Mount. You've heard it said of old, thou shalt not commit adultery. I say, look at a woman with lust. You've committed adultery in your heart. So Job said, I don't want to commit that sin. I'm making a deal right here. Lord, kill me if I break this covenant. Let me ask you a question. Would you be willing to cut that covenant right now? Please think very carefully. I'm not asking, are you willing to go, okay, I'm going to try really hard to not look with lust anymore. You've done that. I'm asking you, are you willing to make a deal right now? The terms, death, if you violate the agreement. This is that serious. Sir, you will go down to the grave if you do not kill your ways, if you do not stop using your eyes as the gateway to fantasize with other people that do not enter into a marital covenant with you. Sir, if you want to stop fantasizing, if you want to stop committing adultery in your heart, why don't you start by making a covenant with your eyes? Good morning, heathens. I'm your teacher, Mr. Mr.